Hi everyone. In this lesson, I want to take you behind the scenes of an illustration I've been working on and show you how I changed the composition after getting feedback from my editor. This illustration originally started as a double page spread, but two pages were designed quite differently. One page had most of the illustration, while the other page had a single little hedgehog along with some text. After I talked to my editor about the illustration, she suggested that I make the whole thing feel more like one continuous spread. Instead of having the illustration feel divided between the two pages, we wanted the artwork to flow across the entire spread and feel more connected. So, in this video, I'm going to show you how I'm making that change. This is actually a really normal part of the illustration process. Sometimes you have an idea that looks good on its own, but once you see it in the context of the whole book, you realize that the composition could work better in a different way. I really like showing this part of the process because illustration isn't always about getting everything perfect on the first try. A lot of it is about looking, adjusting, moving things around, and seeing what makes the image work better. Um, as you can see here, the hedgehog is very big, but I'm going to work on it later. The first thing I want to start uh, with is the green background. I already have this green area on the first page, so I'm simply extending it into the second page. This is very simple change, but it immediately starts connecting the two pages. Before, there was a very clear difference between the illustrated page and the page with the hedgehog and text. Now, the green background starts to travel across the whole spread, so it feels more like we are staying in the same place. I like starting with these bigger areas before getting into the details. Especially when I'm working with collage, I find it much easier to build the image from large shapes and then slowly add smaller pieces on top. So first I have this big green area. Then I start bringing some bushes. I'm adding different shapes and different pieces of green because I don't want the whole background to feel like one flat block. The nice thing about working with collage is that I can build up the environment with very simple shapes, a little piece I can put there and another place, and suddenly the background starts to feel much more alive. I'm not trying to make every bush look completely different. I actually like repeating some shapes and textures because it helps everything feel like it belongs to the same world. I'm also adding some smaller green pieces around the edges. These are little details, but they help me transition between the larger shapes. And I decide to add a tree. The tree gives me a nice, strong shape on the second page and also helps the forest continue into that space. At this point, I'm mostly thinking about filling around or half of the second page. I don't want to cover the entire page because I still need to leave room for the words. That is something I have to keep in mind throughout the whole process. When you are making an illustration for a picture book, you're never really working with just the illustration. The text is also part of the composition. So I need to make the page feel rich enough to be interesting, but also need to leave some quieter areas where the words can sit comfortably. I actually really like having these quieter areas in picture book illustrations. Sometimes it's tempting to fill every empty space because you think the page looks unfinished, but empty space can be very useful. It gives the eye somewhere to rest and it gives the text room to breathe. So here I'm adding enough greenery to make the second page feel connected to the first one, but I'm still keeping open area for the text. Once I have these larger elements in place, I'm going to start looking at my hedgehog again. Um, Now you can start seeing the spreads come together. It's interesting because I'm not really changing the entire idea of the illustration. I'm mostly changing the way the elements communicate with each other. The original version had two pages that worked more independently. Now I'm trying to make them feel like one world. This is one of the things I really enjoy about revising illustrations. Sometimes a small compositional change can completely change the feeling of the image. At this stage, I'm not worrying too much about teeny details. I'm mainly looking at the big shapes, the movement, that the balance, and the overall feeling. Once I'm happy with those things, I can come back and refine the smaller details. So, this is the process I'm using to transform the original double page illustration into a full spread illustration. And I think the most important thing I want you to take away from this is that changing your illustration after feedback doesn't mean that the original version was a failure. It's simply part of the process. Sometimes you need to see an illustration in the context of the whole book before you understand what it really needs. And sometimes an editor, art director, and or another person looking at the work can notice something that you simply can't see because you've been working on it for so long. So don't be afraid to move things around, experiment, or even completely rethink a composition. Your first version is not necessarily your final version. For me, this is the exciting part, taking something I already made and asking, okay, how can I make this work even better? So let's keep working on the spread and see where it takes us. Now I'm adding another tree to the second page. I am building it up piece by piece. So I'm placing each part of the tree individually and seeing how everything comes together. Um, I start with the main trunk and then slowly add smaller branches. and leaves. I really like working this way because I can adjust e- each little piece as I go instead of deciding everything at once. And now I'm adding the leaves. As you can see, some of my leaves are quite big like this. I actually really like keeping them this size. I think the larger leaves give the illustration a more playful graphic feeling, and they also help the shapes stand out nicely, especially when we look at the whole spread from a distance. I'm not trying to make every leaf tiny or realistic. I like exaggerating the shapes a little bit and letting them become part of the visual language of the illustration. So I'm just placing them one by one, moving them around until the tree starts to feel natural within the composition. I'll keep adding a few more leaves here and there, but I'm also trying not to make the tree too dense. I want to keep some space between the shapes so we can still see the layers underneath and the tree doesn't become one big solid shape. Little by little, it's starting to feel like the tree belongs to this side of the forest, and I really like how it helps connect the second page with the rest of the illustration. And while you're making a collage illustration like this, just remember to be patient with yourself. It can take quite a bit of time because you're building the image piece by piece, and sometimes you might feel like you are not making much progress. But trust the process and keep going. Little by little, all those small pieces start coming together, and eventually you look at the whole illustration and feel really happy with what you've created. So don't rush it, enjoy the process, take your time, and let the illustration grow naturally. In the end, all those little pieces are what make the final image feel so special. And with those final leaves, I think our tree is ready. So we can move on. Now I'm going to work on the hedgehogs. As you might remember, in the original version, I only had one hedgehog and it was quite a bit larger. But as I started changing the composition and expanding the second page, I realized that having three smaller hedgehogs would work much better. This was one of the changes that happened naturally while I was working. At first, I was simply trying to make the spread feel more balanced and connected. But once I started opening up the composition, I realized that I could also use this new space to tell the story a little more strongly. Since I wrote the story myself, I already know what's happening in the scene. But as I'm illustrating it, I can choose how much of that story I want to show through the images. And I really like the idea of having three hedgehogs leaving the forest because of the plastic bag. It gives the scene much more movement and emotion, and it makes the relationship between the characters and the plastic bag clearer. So I'm making the hedgehog smaller, and I want to place them in different positions. I don't want them look like they're standing in a straight line. I want them feel like they are actually moving away um, from the forest. And as you can see now, I'm making the eyes. Once I'm done with the eyes, I'm gonna place them and we will see how they will look on the whole page. Also, making them different sizes also helps create a little depth. One can feel closer while another feels slightly further away, um, or one can be older or younger hedgehog. We never know that. It depends on the reader's imagination, I think. So we'll see. Now I'm going back to the hedgehogs and refining their shapes a little bit. I feel like they've become a little too sharp and pointy. So I'm cutting away some of those extra parts to make their shapes softer and more natural. I'm keeping the overall character the same, but just simplifying the edges. I think this makes them feel much cuter and fits better with the soft, playful feeling of the illustration. And as you can probably see by now, collage illustration takes time. So don't feel like you have to decide that a piece is finished the moment you make it. I'm not going to immediately say, okay, this is good enough, I can use it. I keep working on the pieces until I feel happy with them and they really fit the illustration. I think this is especially important with the collage because you're building everything piece by piece. Sometimes a shape looks fine at first, but once you place it into the full illustration, you notice that it needs to be changed a little more. So take your time and keep refining until you feel good about it. And don't forget that you are the first person who sees your illustration before anyone else sees it. You have to leave it with it and look at it over and over again. So, first of all, you need to like what you're making. When you are happy with your illustration and you feel that it's really yours, that feeling will come through to the people who see it too. And now, when I look at the whole spread, the forest, the tree, the greenery, and the three hedgehogs all start working together. I'm also making sure that these new elements don't feel like they were simply added to fill the empty space. I want them to feel like they naturally belong in the scene, as if they were always meant to be part of the illustration. So now I am going to start placing the hedgehogs around the spread and see where they work best. I'm moving them around and a little bit, trying different positions and looking at how they interact with the rest of the composition. At the same time, I'm going to keep adding a few more green pieces to bring the whole composition together. I don't consider the illustration finished yet, so I'm still adding, moving, and adjusting things as I go. As you can see, I'm still working on it and making little changes until everything starts to feel right to me. This is really part of the collage process. You keep building and refining the image until you're happy with the overall composition. and it's starting to feel more and more like one continuous forest, I think. And that is especially important when you are working on a full spread, because the center of the book can naturally create a visual division. There is a physical fold between the two pages, but I don't want that fold to make the illustration feel like two separate images. I want the forest to continue naturally from one page to the another. At the same time, I'm being careful about what I place near the center. I don't want to put anything really important right in the fold because it can easily get lost when the book is printed and bound. So visually, I'm letting the greenery flow across the spreads while keeping the main characters in places where they can be seen clearly. I'm also checking the text area as I work. Now that I've added more trees, bushes, and green pieces, I need to make sure I haven't taken away too much space for the words. It's very easy to keep adding things because everything looks nice, but suddenly you realize there is nowhere comfortable for the text to go. So I'm intentionally keeping this white area quieter, like up there. I think this is something I've learned more and more from making picture books. Sometimes you have to be comfortable with leaving a space empty. It doesn't mean the illustration is unfinished. That empty space is part of the composition and it gives the text room to breathe. As I keep moving the hedgehogs around, I'm also thinking about the overall direction of the spread. I want the eye to move naturally through the illustration. The greenery brings us into the forest. The tree gives us a strong visual point, and then the hedgehogs create movement through the scene. The plastic bag becomes another little visual clue that connects the characters to what is happening in the story. So even though I'm adding more elements, I still want the composition to feel clear and calm rather than crowded. I'm just following the movement of the image and adjusting things until everything starts to flow together. So as you can see, this illustration changed quite a lot from where we started. I began with one hedgehog and a much emptier second page, and little by little, I extended the forest, added the trees and greenery, and changed the hedgehog into three smaller characters. I really like how these changes happened naturally while I was working. I didn't have everything planned from the beginning. One change led to another, and eventually the composition started to tell the story more clearly. And I think that's one of the most important things about making illustrations. Don't be afraid to keep changing things until they feel right. So that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed seeing how I transformed this illustration into a full spread. Let me know if you have any questions. I'll see you in the next lesson. Bye.